you can really consider early retirement. You could retire a millionaire. It's like, yeah, whatever.
Windings converted to an ESOP, an employee stock ownership plan, in 2008. Can you just share a little bit of the origin story of the why of choosing employee ownership?
They did not want to sell this business to someone who would move it out of the small town of New Ulm. And they also didn't want their employees, they wanted them to continue having employment and participating. They got the idea to start transferring the ownership of the company to the employees themselves. And over 10 years, he not only transitioned, but he prepared them to take over the business, which is really a brilliant way to do transition, right? And to ensure that they will be able to continue the business. And I credit Winding's success today to that approach to transition.
The culture of Windings changed. You're a worker, you're just getting a paycheck. Well, then it changed. I'm an owner. What I'm doing is actually going to affect my wealth. What I produce is going to be to the best of my ability. I'll never forget the day that Roger got up in front of the plant and he talked about this ESOP and explained really what it was. He was saying, if this is managed right and you guys work hard, you can really consider early retirement. You could retire a millionaire. It's like, yeah, whatever. So I didn't really believe it, but gosh darn it, 28 years, he was absolutely right.
This is generational wealth that he has made possible for over 200 people. As the company does well, they do well.
I was always fascinated by entrepreneurship and the business journey that people took. And I found myself really a lot of times reading about companies that, like, the founder or the leader got to the end of the journey and didn't know what to do, and they just kind of floundered. And I really thought, man, if I ever had the opportunity to own a business, I feel like you could use it for something deeper than the purpose of the business. But as Westcom grew from 2 people with 5 employees doing incredible things to like 100 people, 200 people, are now crossing state lines, 150 employees who believe in what we're doing, and we're doing all these incredible things. But if the ownership group is starting to lose interest in this, how far can we go with this long term? And I just sat down with Jeremy one day and I said, this isn't going to work. We can't keep going this way. What are we going to do? And I said, well, that's a really, really good question. We're going to go explore a few different options. Every time we sat down with a private equity group, we probably didn't find the right people or whatever the situation was, but I didn't like it. It didn't feel like it was the right move for Westcom. So yeah, and I think it's an interesting journey, but you have to have patience with, like, what was the end goal? The end goal for me was, how in the world do we keep this business going? And what does 20, 30, 40 years down the road look like for the business and for Shane?
As a young man, I had worked in the technology business for many years, and I decided I wanted to have my own company. I was frustrated with many of the things that were going on in the world. So I founded this company called Code Weavers, and I wanted to do 4 things. I wanted to do meaningful work, I wanted to do challenging work, I wanted to work with people I respected, and I wanted to make money, right? That's what a business owner does. I came to a point 4 or 5 years ago where I was really, feeling like I'd accomplished the mission, a lot of personal burnout, and I really needed to do something different, and I needed a way out. I didn't know what I wanted, so I spent a lot of time talking to my staff. I knew I didn't want the company to just die. I knew I didn't just want to sell it to, someone who didn't understand the business. And then this idea of an employee ownership trust, this came up at the end of a conversation, and it just gripped me, and it seemed like a really fantastic idea. And so I worked with Common Trust and some other experts, and just last year finished converting the company to an employee ownership trust, and I'm so far very pleased with the results.
The outcomes that people were getting from especially from the eventual goal, which for a lot of folks was the exit or transition, fulfilled some of their financial goals in a lot of cases, but wasn't fulfilling some of the other goals that they had. In particular, owners that I'd worked with might have walked away with a decent chunk of change, but ultimately were a little bit disappointed to see the company that they had spent, many years of their life creating, transitioning into the hands of an owner who, didn't understand the business. We also have this moment where we could potentially create a huge generational transfer of wealth to the people who are actually running these businesses, and do that at the same time as honoring the work that the owners and founders have brought to create those companies, and giving them a good retirement and payout.
I dug pretty deep into what I would want out of a transition and thought that the most important things I wanted to hold in that transition were sustaining the great culture and legacy that we had built over time. Our team was excellent, and I wanted to really honor all their contributions at the same time while ensuring a fair exit for myself. So kind of thinking about how do I hold both fairness and that legacy and sustainability central.
What does it mean to be a worker owner as opposed to what I was familiar with, which is just being an employee, a subordinate, taking direction, letting other people make difficult decisions. It's the only thing I'd ever known in a career or in work. I think I want the benefits of being a worker owner, but do I also want the responsibility of making difficult decisions and taking a bit more ownership than I was familiar with? Another part of the decision, I think, was just sort of assessing kind of the organization culture itself, and really determining does this seem like a good fit for me? I'm coming up on a year at the Improve Group, and I've had a wonderful experience so far, and I see myself in this organization for longer term than I have maybe with other jobs, other roles. I think in part because it's a good fit for me personally and professionally, but because there's a strong culture that's also very dynamic and adaptable. It makes me feel as though there's a future for me here, even if I can't predict the future. I trust that through kind of shared ownership, we can make decisions together.
Working together. Many years ago, probably going back 30 some years ago when we're all new in the company, we would have conversations often about how we wanted to work with one another, what experiences we wanted to make for our customers, and how we were going to make decisions. We're part of something much bigger in terms of the world in which we live, and we have an obligation and a passion to help communities where we live and work thrive and do the right thing. So those principles have really created an environment where people tend to stay. I'm not the only one kicking around with 30 some years of tenure. There are a lot of people with 30, 20, 25 years of tenure. And they thrive because they can be themselves. They can be authentic, and they can really be their best self.
Right? We are trying to be successful in our business, but at the same time, we consider a lot of different things when we make a decision, right? Because we want to do things that are right for our vendors, our staff members, our customers, and quite frankly, for the communities that we live in. And it wasn't necessarily how do we need to exit the business? It was really about this great responsibility that we knew as leaders that we had to the current and future generations of staff members, right? We owed it to the staff members to make sure that we had a plan in place for the future ownership of the company.
People said that they knew how their work affected the success of the business. And tied with that question was also the sentiment that everyone believed that we would continue to be successful in the future.